Hello, welcome to Premier Scene. I'm Claire Bueno as we delve deeper into the visceral adaptation of Dylan Thomas's Under the Milkwood, starring Rhys Ifans. Rhys, lovely to meet you this evening. Now, we've got a Dylan Thomas voice play adapting for the big screen, so it must have been a really exciting creative project for you to be a part of.
Yeah, because the text is so kind of rich and full of images, at every given turn. It kind of, although it was, I guess, initially a radio play, I think it lends itself equally as good, if not more, to film, but it was a real challenge, you couldn't put every single image that Dylan writes onto the screen or it would be a very, very long film, so it was kind of a matter of, selecting the juicy stuff, I guess, yeah.
Yes, because you have produced it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that challenge like for you?
Oh well, not as huge a challenge as kind of acting in it, and I mean my producing was kind of more creative as opposed to get my hands dirty with hiring and firing people.
What I really loved about watching it, and you were talking about the imagery involved, is it feels like it's even more important for the actor to own the words. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, completely. I think Dylan's notes to his actors when he first had the play read in New York, the actors wanted to know, what to do, and he said, just love the words, and you really have to, and they're kind of easy to love too, because it's just kind of a relentless tirade of beauty and alliteration. It almost becomes mantric, after a while. And that's what we hope to do with the film, is that it kind of lulls the audience into a kind of sense of visual and sonic vertigo, so by the end you're kind of seduced by the whole banquet.
Well, you were talking about seduction, because it's highly sexualised, actually, isn't it? Was that something that was playing a little bit more into the text than Dylan had originally written, I believe?
No, any kind of... no, it's a very, very sensual text, and everyone's sensual in it. It's not just, all the women in it, they're kind of rampant, and it's this real kind of pagan fuckfest. Can I say that?
You certainly can.
But it is, yeah.
And you shot the film twice in Welsh and in English. Yeah. So how challenging was that?
Well, I mean, luckily most of the cast were, we were Welsh speakers, or if we weren't Welsh speakers, some members of the cast actually learned to speak Welsh for the film. Charlotte Church, for example, who's just extraordinary. So it was kind of second nature for a lot of us Welsh actors. We've worked at that before in the past, but because this language is so dense, it's not something you could, the language in Welsh is as dense as it is in English, and it was foreign to me because I only knew this piece in English, so it was tough, particularly doing the first voice, I mean, it's extraordinary in Welsh. It's beautiful, utterly beautiful. So I wouldn't really call it a translation, more an adaptation, because in the real world, the characters Dylan writes about in Under Milkwood would have actually probably in the real world spoken Welsh anyway. So
yeah, that's true. And Captain Cat, he seems there's a real sadness and solitude, isn't there, with him?
Yeah, I think so. I think in one of the original drafts, Dylan had toyed with the idea of making Captain Cat the first voice, and we very much wanted to go that route. And it's almost like, the film particularly, it's almost like, I don't know, I always see it as the kind of, the images that pass through the eyes of a drowning man, So it's almost like his whole life, that this whole village and this whole town is kind of occurring in his drowning mind, and it's something really kind of soulful and sad about that.
Melancholic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Waves and water, actually, I don't want to keep you for too long, but waves and water, now you bring that up, is also, it feels almost like a character in itself in this as well, watching it.
Yeah, there is the ebb and flow of the tide and the seasons and the day, the sun, and I think Dylan, that's kind of a theme throughout Dylan's writing, it's kind of that excavation of the metaphysical Yeah, and that's what makes it kind of, pagan, I guess, and sexy, and a fuckfest.
I would imagine this is a lovely project for you to be a part of as well.
Yeah, it's been incredible. It was a brilliant experience. I haven't done much acting in the past, so it was quite novel, but also to be working amongst such an incredible ensemble cast, a lot of whom are Welsh acting legends. So that was incredible. To have Dylan Thomas's Under Milk Wood as the piece was amazing, and such incredible prose, such beautiful words to be able to speak, and yeah, it was great. I had a ball.
And to sing as well, I would think, because you're connecting to the words in a very different way than you normally would, presumably, when you're performing.
Well, yeah. Well, I suppose all sort of performance and singing is you're generally connecting with the words in whatever sort of context. But when you're playing a character, it's sort of a different thing. And my character is Polly Garter, and she's quite complex. On the face of it, she just sort of looks like this very promiscuous woman who everybody in the village disapproves of. Well, lots of the males are fine with her, but pretty much everybody in the village sees her as a bit of a goer or whatnot. So there is that sort of on the face of it, but then she's also sort of like a Mother Earth character. All she really wants to do is procreate. She just loves babies. She just wants to have as many babies as possible. But she's also pining for her one lover who she lost, who died. And she's always constantly singing about him and pining for him. But then also because she's not sort of very well liked by lots of the other women in the village, she's quite an isolated character. But she's really sort of strong in the fact that maybe she doesn't even know that these other characters sort of think this way of her, or think ill of her. But regardless, she just carries on doing whatever she wants to do anyway. So she's a pretty good, strong feminist message from Polly Garter.
And what I'm thinking as well with the text is that because it's all about a dream, isn't it, really? And I'm just wondering whether the dream sequences allow us then to have an introspection with the characters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, so it's all set in this fictional town called Llaregib, and yeah, it's all very dreamscapey, very surreal, and you're not really sure where reality comes in, if it comes in at all. But the majority of the time, it's sort of quite a voyeuristic look into, the innermost, darkest secrets and lives of these inhabitants of this tiny fictional Welsh town.
And it's set in the 1950s, so it's a great opportunity to get dressed up in some wonderful costumes, because it shows your figure off wonderfully.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I was the only girl in trousers, because they wanted Polly to be a little bit of a rebel. The wardrobe department and the art department, and they were all wonderful. There was such attention to detail, what with the sets, makeup, costume, everything, really, really incredible attention to detail. So yeah, it was a privilege just to work amongst so many talented, skilled, creative people. It was wonderful.
And you had to as well learn Welsh, I believe, because you shot it in both languages.
Yeah, I'm not a Welsh speaker, unfortunately. I will learn at some point in my life. But yeah, so I had to learn my lines in Welsh, and we filmed them back to back. And luckily, my partner's mum is from Ammanford, which was sort of the dialect of Welsh they were looking for as well. So she coached me through, but then, all of the actors on set were brilliant and really helpful and would help me with line runs. And we had a lovely woman called Nerys as well, who was sort of the Welsh language expert. And so she would made sure that everybody was absolutely pronunciation perfect.
What was it about the voice play that you wanted to adapt for the big screen?
Well, it felt like a nice, big, juicy, iconic piece of Welsh work. I was looking for something, having sort of retired from farming in Ireland. We were looking to relocate to Wales, and I fancied doing something very Welsh. I've relocated back to my hometown, Swansea. It was his centenary coming up, and it just felt right. It hasn't been done for a long time, only been done once before, and it was a challenge, and we took it on.
It's very interesting you say then you come from a farming background, because watching the film...
I just took it up after LA and became a pig farmer in Ireland. I gave it all up for 7 years. I'm not a natural farmer. That's why I'm standing here, doing what I do naturally.
It's filmmaking, but there is a lovely feeling of a synergy
what
between
you're
the
saying.
countryside. Do you know?
You've just picked up on something really important, because funny enough, I just showed the film in Ireland at a film festival, and in my Q&A I stressed how much I've kind of grown up as a filmmaker since Twin Town anyway, but living in a village in Ireland, rural Ireland, and farming, being part of a deeply rural community, not dissimilar to Llaregib, believe you me, a sort of a veneer of respectability kind of, above a subterranean strangeness. And of course, this whole concept of Llaregib is universal. But without that experience, I think there's something subliminal in the experience that just certainly equipped me to get underneath this,
You really do get a feeling of a village life in Wales, don't you, in the 50s?
And they contributed, the community of Solva, where we filmed the movie. I mean, I'm always a firm believer in getting into the community in which you film. Swansea was the same for Twin Town. I knew it really well. I get there early, and I kind of learn as much about this place, get them on our side. The community of Solva is very in this film. They live in, you can just feel their energy. And of course, if you don't get that energy, you're lacking something. But we got that energy and that soul and that earthiness from that community. Because again, Solva's pretty nuts, believe you me.
And dreams are integral to this film.
It's as far as our version is concerned, it's all a dream. We were faced with a very unorthodox structure. No, it's not a classic 3-act narrative structure, which is music to my ears. I mean, it's great to get hold of something that doesn't have this conditioned 3-act structure. Dream-wise, it's such a strange fusion of prose and poetry. That was the biggest challenge, to marry the two. So if you've got poetry operating on a sort of, a subconscious level, obviously, interjected by prose, domesticity, which are very, they're very bawdy, sometimes saccharine, childish. I mean, the piece in itself reflects the man's dichotomy. He was fighting a love-hate relationship with his roots his entire life, and that's what comes through. So it was very difficult to deal with the prose, because I didn't want realism. I think realism against the subconscious poetry would have been just jarring, and so I decided to try and forge a kind of slightly cartoony, animated caricature aspect, because I think that's the nature of a dreamscape. I didn't want. There's a lot of actors in the movie who are first-time actors, a few amateurs in there even. That was another quality, that because there's a vulnerability and a certain sort of limited technique, that for me that added to some of those characterizations, especially Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. She's a butcher stroke opera singer, so there's a kind of delivery in there that's just, it's almost like taking frames out, and I just felt I didn't want realism. It's a dream, in a dream.
It feels like that with the cinematography as well. There's a lot of sort of soft focus.
Well, that was again, I didn't have the money or the scope to get to CGI on. And I don't like CGI anyway. There's a few effects in there, but not many. I was looking for analog, simple 50s. I researched some 50s. Early Hitchcock, Bilingual, later Lynch. Lynch isn't. He does it. He doesn't. He's a very analog filmmaker. So, I was looking for just the simple things, simple lock-offs, Vaseline on the lens, prism rods to give it that sort of fluidity. The whole thing is it's the sea moving in and out. It's subterranean. It's got to move, light and dark, up and down. So I wanted the camera to move. I wanted it to be, or try and be, kaleidoscopic in some way, and not take the foot off the gas. It really has to move in a forward trajectory and become a strange anomaly of a cinematic thing. For me, it's an art piece.
Absolutely.
I don't mean that
in an
arty, grandiose way. It's a work of no. It's an art. As far as this is not just cinema. It's an art. It's got another life with DVD. You can watch it over and over again. I hope, You can discover the symbolism. None of our symbolism has been plonked into this baby. You know, Michael Breen, one of our co-writers, he understands that world implicitly. He kept us tight and we didn't just bung stuff in willy-nilly. So there's lots to discover in it. Educationally, I want it to go back on the curriculum. It's a masterpiece of text. I mean, it's an amazing piece of text. And all we try to do is reintroduce it to another. There's an audience out there that it's not just a kind of art house Curzon audience at all. We've been to counterculture festivals really successfully in the summer, and we're getting great response from people who don't even know who Dylan Thomas is, really. They're going, fucking hell, these words, man, they're powerful, you know. So, and if you don't, you know, want it to be a film, just buy the CD and listen to it in the car, or close your eyes. It's fine. Close your eyes, listen to it. You know.
You've had the challenge of adapting Dylan's script into a screenplay. I mean, that sounds like a challenge and a half.
Yeah, it was a big challenge, and I had my co-writer Michael Breen and then Kevin as well to help. But it was a very interesting business to get inside the mind of Dylan Thomas.
Well, imagine. So, did you then, in that case, study him to get deeper and deeper into his psychology, to get where he was thinking?
We did a lot of research, and obviously we read the text back to back, and we were both familiar with it already. But we looked further into it. We looked into where he was at the time, who he was, what was going on. I mean, he was quite advanced into the last part of his life at the time, and not very well. There was all sorts of texts from other Dylan Thomas works that seemed to have been brought into it, and it was essentially just looking into the idea of a dream.
And also the fact that the play itself is actually longer than the screenplay, isn't it? So have you obviously had to kind of whittle it down?
Yeah, I mean, the way we felt about the text that is Under Milk Wood is that we think that you wouldn't, having read previous examples of his work, it wasn't what you would call highly polished. So we felt that there were certain first draft elements still left in what he was doing. So all we did to bring it down into our 90-minute movie was to pull out things like repetition, and we had to take out a few bits and pieces here and there which we felt would do the least damage to it. But we felt that we stayed very true to what he'd written.
And what's beautiful about watching the film is it's highly, highly visual, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to hand a lot of that to Kevin, but in the way that he uses his saturated colours. But I suppose our main idea was that what we had to do is provide dreamlike quality to what it is, because that's what the movie is. It's a big dream, and dreams don't contain logic. But also, if you think about the text, it was written for the ear. It was written initially as a radio play. So what we had to do is try and present images which weren't just representations of what he had already written. We had to juxtapose images. We had to find a way of providing novelty which ran for 90 minutes.
And getting to know the characters as well individually, so you can write that richness.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course, every facet and every aspect of each character is a part of Dylan Thomas. So it was like becoming more and more involved with him as a person and going deeper inside his mind. And sometimes that's quite disturbing in this movie. I mean, and what we decided within that was that we weren't going to run away from the darker side of the movie, and we weren't going to run away from the sexuality either, because a lot of people just, I suppose, they particularly on stage tend to try and gloss over that, and there's a few sort of naughty bits, but everyone tries to sort of say, well, that didn't really happen. Not speaking for all theatrical people at all, but we just thought we're going to engage with that because we felt it was a big part of what was going on in his ideas.
Important not to dilute it, ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that was the director Kevin Allen leading from the front and saying what I want here is something powerful, sexy, edgy, dangerous, and dark, and I want to work with that, and that's what we hopefully gave him.